Trek favorites. What are yours? Welcome to Trek Favorites. This is a show where you get to hear from some of my friends and hopefully some of yours about one of their favorite Star Trek episodes from any series. Those are the rules. Just pick one. Doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't matter why it means so much to them that they would pick it as a favorite. It just means that it matters to them. This time, I'm pleased to welcome for the first time to Trek Favorites my friend Joe Kissell. Joe, it's great to see you.
Nice to be here. I am, by the way, drinking out of my Enterprise D mug, actual official Star Trek tea Earl Grey hot, and that's the truth. So,
and you're properly attired and everything. I mean,
as I was telling you earlier, this is the only Star Trek T-shirt I have at the moment. I know it's a little bit of mixing of eras, but we do have a lot of mixing of eras in Star Trek, so I feel kind of okay about that.
Oh, absolutely. It's all Star Trek. It's all Star Trek. So when I asked Joe to pick a favorite, he picked one that I was surprised it hadn't been picked already because it seems in some ways an obvious choice, but I still was surprised that he picked Darmok from The Next Generation. So, Joe, my question, as I do with everyone, what is it about Darmok that resonated with you?
Well, let me first say it was a tough choice because I have spent a long portion of my life watching Star Trek, and when I was, 6 years old and watching the original series on reruns, my mom would make fun of me because every day I'd come home from school, turn on the TV, and as the opening chord of the music played, I would recount to her the entire plot of that episode. So I'm a Trek fan from way back, and yet of all the episodes of all the series that I have loved, this one was the very first one that came to my mind, and so this episode aired in September of 1991. That was just a few months after I got my master's degree in linguistics. This is an episode about linguistics. And this is an episode in which you have two characters who seem to be speaking the same kinds of words, but they're not really communicating. And it's about figuring out how to communicate under a rather stressful condition. And I watched this episode and I'm just like, this is exactly what I was trained to do, man. This is so cool. And, of course it was like, it's fiction and it was televisionized. Okay. They had to make this, you have 44 minutes or whatever it is. You can't literally learn a new language in this period of time. So they had to take some liberties. Okay, but they did it so brilliantly. They showed in that very short period of time with all the hand waving, yes, but they showed the essence of figuring out how to communicate with someone when you don't have a phrase book or a dictionary or any seeming common ground. And as someone who studied linguistics in grad school and specifically translation, specifically how, like, I had professors who would go to whatever the far reaches of the world, go find some, long lost tribe, and starting from absolute scratch, like, figure out how to speak their language. Like, they didn't know how to ask what's the word for blank. They had to figure that out, but this was part of my training, is how you figure this stuff out. And so that was the first of several things that I will mention. Really, really tickled me about this episode. And I rewatched it in preparation for this, and I just still think it is absolutely brilliant. One of my favorite Trek episodes of all time.
This one was not one of my favorite Trek episodes when it first aired, because I didn't have your background, and it wasn't your typical Star Trek adventure. But
Mhm.
the more I've watched it over the years, I've come to appreciate a lot of what you just described, the difficulty of communication and the deeper side of it. And I've really come to recognize it as one of Star Trek: The Next Generation's finest moments.
Yeah, I've read some sites that like rank Star Trek episodes, and in several places this is ranked in the top 5 or 10. According to whatever people with opinions. Okay, I agree with that. Like I don't know that I would say this is the best Star Trek episode of all time, but and I don't even know that I would say it's the best Next Generation episode. But it's the one that I feel the most personal affinity with, um, and that linguistic aspect, that whole, like, how do we figure out how to communicate with someone where we don't share anything but the very minimal thread in common? How do we do that? That's remarkable to me.
And Picard was the perfect captain to do this kind of episode. He's a bit more cerebral,
Yes,
arguably, than most of the other captains. So it fit the character so well. Um,
absolutely. Go ahead.
no, it struggled a little bit with with the alien makeup, but
Yeah,
that's
well,
that's
yeah.
okay. You got to look at when this was made, and you have to suspend your disbelief just a little bit.
Right. We're going to talk about that makeup in a second, but don't let me forget about that. But what's interesting is that, first of all, as you know, so Picard and then the alien captain, the Tamarian captain, beam down to this planet, and Picard totally does not understand what's going on. He thinks the other guy wants to fight him. He's handing him a knife. He thinks it's going to be a battle. That's not at all what was going on. He eventually figures it out. But up on the Enterprise, Worf and Riker and Troy and Data are all trying to also figure out what's going on because they want to rescue the captain. And even Data, with who you would think would be able to kind of figure out some linguistic stuff, got nothing. Like they come to completely the wrong conclusions about what's happening and people's motivations and how to move forward. So it's really easy, and honestly, even when you speak the same language, especially if you're using, I don't know, email, it's really easy to have misunderstandings. And I agree with you that Picard is the perfect person to handle this because he is so even tempered, much more even tempered than I am, much more sort of, all right, we're going to carefully examine the facts here and with great respect for everyone involved, somehow figure out the right thing and do it. Like I would love to have that presence of mind and that skill. And maybe that's another part of why this resonates with me is that here you're seeing not only, I mean, Picard doesn't claim to be a linguist, but he does claim to be a diplomat, and he ends up doing some diplomacy and kind of making a friend. So I would aspire to that.
There's only one moment that I felt like I wasn't sure. It may be just so Picard, but when the Temerian captain threw Picard the knife,
Yeah,
and Picard threw it back at him, and it's like,
right.
no, wait a minute, you've got an alien in front of you that's armed with two knives, and he just gave you one. Okay, that's a real leap of faith to give it back with having no other weapon. Should your interpretation be incorrect?
Yeah, I mean that was part of the dramatic tension of the show. Is Picard going to lay down his life for in the name of peace? He because one of his principles is that violence should be avoided if possible. So if his impression is that violence is the only thing that the other guy wants, is he willing to actually sacrifice his life to maintain that ideal? I wouldn't have done that. I would have taken a damn knife. But but again, I also can't fault Picard for not being perspicacious enough to realize there's an invisible energy monster here that we got to fight. Like, how would he know? Because he doesn't know, he doesn't know the mythology that the Tamarians' language is based on. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. He doesn't know who these people are. He doesn't know the beast at Tanagra, So just saying those words doesn't mean anything, but he puts it together piece by piece as events unfold. So
with your linguistics background, I did not know that. Now it makes perfect sense why you would pick this. I'm not prepared to say how realistic is it, because as you said, when we started out, there's a bit of a disclaimer here because it's TV.
Yeah.
But is this? Was that a reasonably realistic portrayal of how somebody would go about something like this?
I felt, and I still feel, that it was a reasonable portrayal given the constraints of TV and time and the fact that we are addressing an English-speaking audience. So you could have somebody speaking a completely different language and it's like subtitled or something, but if somebody comes up to me and starts speaking a language that's unfamiliar to me, there's kind of a whole you don't jump immediately to let's get into your mythology. It's like, well, let's figure out how do you say these sounds, in African languages like Xhosa and Zulu, there are click sounds, this sound and this sound and this sound, and those sounds are unnatural for English speakers. In Chinese, you got tones, different ways your pitch rises or falls make a word mean something completely different. And those are unnatural to English ears. So when you encounter, if you have a linguistics background, you encounter new language, you're going to spend a while just listening, like trying to figure out what's the catalog of sounds. How do I distinguish those sounds from one another in my ear? How do I make them with my mouth? Sometimes it's really hard to learn how to make these sounds. And you're going to start working on things like, okay, you use, and you hope you're going to point at this, and you hope that the person is going to give you the word for mug. You hope. They might give you the word for point. They might give you the word for that's a rude gesture in my culture. They might give you the word for tea, right? You don't know. You have to make some assumptions and some guesses and some hopes, but you start looking at objects and trying to get names of objects, and then if you get the word for pen, you're going to do this, and hope that your informant responds with the word for throw, and then you try. What if I throw 2 pens? Or what if you throw a pen to me? And you just do all these variations, because I throw might be something completely different from you throw or we throw. So you work through basic nouns and actions that are pretty easy to demonstrate, and you kind of build from there. If there's no language, like if I speak a little bit of French and you mainly speak German, but you also speak a little bit of French, then we have a leg up. We can use French as an intermediate language to help us learn each other's language. But if there's no language in common, you have to really start from some basic stuff. And you, the linguist, will be scribbling madly in your notebook in phonetics, in International Phonetic Alphabet, trying to write down these sounds you're hearing. And like, I just heard a string of syllables. How do those divide into words? Like, we don't necessarily pause between each word. So you hear a string of syllables, you might not know which of those are words and which of them are whatever. So, okay. Anyway, it's a long, detailed process, but this episode of Star Trek sort of shortcut all of that by saying, okay, we're going to use English. Okay, we're going to use words, that anyone can recognize, anyone in our audience can recognize. So we don't have to worry about the sounds. We don't have to worry about the meanings. What we have to worry about is the images. So Shaka, when the walls fell. Okay, I understand walls falling. That is a meaningful phrase to me. And I'm going to guess Shaka was some guy. I don't know. But what does that mean? What does that series of words mean? And we eventually work out that it means failure. It means something did not succeed. And Temba, his arms open. Somebody is doing this gesture as though to give something. So we eventually learned that means give. We don't know who Temba is. We don't need to, but we have. I thought it was just an amazing way of explaining the essence of how you learn meaning without getting bogged down in all those details about the sounds and the vocabulary, because that's going to be like the first many months of really learning a new language from scratch.
Another thing that I thought was interesting that I don't know was really totally examined. The idea that, okay, the Temerians were very willing to potentially sacrifice their own life to make this connection or make or complete this communication. But they enforced that on
Yes.
Picard, because both of them could easily have been killed.
Yes.
And so, it's like, all right, I'm all for communication, but I'm not sure that, and admittedly, Picard and the Enterprise showed up and they were seeking communication, but at what cost? And that seemed to be overlooked as the story wrapped up. And I know 45 minutes, and you can only do so much, but it surprised me a little bit that radical approach would be taken without trying to wrap it up in some fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It would have been really nice to dig into that more. The thing is, when you go to a faraway place where people speak another language, it's never just that the language is different. It's also that the culture is different, and the way people think about stuff is different, and the values are different. I think most people around the world, regardless of their language, or regardless of their culture, would probably agree that stealing is a bad idea and killing is a bad idea. But in some places, gestures that I use innocently every day are seen as really, really offensive, and vice versa. And there are cultural assumptions behind the things that people do and people say that are sometimes represented in language and sometimes just represented in behavior. So we don't have time in this episode to get into why is this so important to the Tamarians? Why are they willing to risk lives for this like shared storytelling? What exactly do they hope to gain from this? We don't exactly know, but what we can infer is that the relative values that their culture places on communication and respect, mutual respect, are really different from those of the Federation. And even though I might think, well, that's weird or even dumb, like there's a lot of weird in the world. And I'm sure much more weird all across the galaxy. And the more we can become aware that like just different people just think about things in other ways, and you might have a judgment about that, and your judgment might be right or wrong, or it might just be neutral. But regardless, being aware that the different people put more or less value on particular things can certainly improve communication.
So you asked me to not let you forget about the makeup.
So okay, all right. So the Tamarian captain, Dathan, and by the way, I have a friend who loved this episode so much but he named his cat Dathon. And I was one of the few people that got that. So I'm just let another little, like, whatever, geeky moment. But Dathon, okay, the other captain's name. Picard and Dathon at Eladrel. So the guy is in kind of bad makeup. But that guy, that actor, has been in another Star Trek episode. Do you know? Did you look? I assume you probably looked this up on Wikipedia.
I did not look it up, but I know I know him from Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan.
That's right. So Paul Winfield is his name, and he played the captain of the ship that Chekhov was on. So Wrath of Khan, of course, starts with the Chekhov and this captain beaming down to Ceti Alpha 5. And they're captured by Khan and his cohorts, and they put the weird things in their ears and control them. Okay, so that captain, the other guy who wasn't Chekhov, that got the thing put in his ear, and eventually he kills himself with his own phaser. Same guy, same actor who played Dathon. I would never have known that because of the makeup. I mean, pretty heavy makeup, but I thought that was a delightful tidbit.
Yeah, I agree, and again, you have to go with some of the. There are only so much they can do for a weekly TV series with the budgets they're on, and with the makeup tech that was available at the time.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays we have some really, like, we have Saru with his threat ganglia. We have like some really crazy stuff. But yeah, for the time, I mean, it was better than what we saw in the original series, better than the Klingons in the original series.
Yeah, yeah, or the Gorn, yeah,
or the Gorn, yeah. Now there was another actor in this episode that people might find noteworthy. This was Ashley Judd's acting debut. So Ashley Judd played, and I have to look this up. Oh crap! It's not where I thought it was going to be. Lieutenant Robin Leffler. Okay, so a very small role, but this was actually her acting debut. I had certainly never heard of her, and so she appears in this episode. So that's kind of a neat thing.
Wow, I missed that. I'm going to have to go back because, as I recall, Robin Leffler is a bit of a recurring role, has some other more significant roles in subsequent Treks. So
yeah, so she was
episodes.
She was on the shuttlecraft with Worf. They were trying to get down to the planet's surface, but they didn't make it because of the whatever field thing. Right. So go back and check that out. But
that's interesting.
I have to mention another thing. This is really important. Like, we get the language, and the culture and the actors, but there's another thing about this episode that I cannot omit because it is super important. And that is, of course, Picard's jacket. This was the episode in which the jacket made its debut. So, there's been this evolution of uniforms. Like in the first season, they had the awful jumpsuits, and they eventually evolved, and they had the two-piece, like the tunic and the pants, and I'm sure you will have talked with one of your guests about the Picard maneuver.
Not yet, but we will.
Not the real Picard maneuver, but the other Picard maneuver. Anyway, it has to do with his uniform. But anyway, in this season, occasionally you would see, instead of the red shirt, you would see a gray shirt with a red jacket over top of it. And in this is the first episode we see this in. In this episode, the red jacket has sort of leather shoulders, like more than epaulets, but like the whole shoulders are leather. In later versions, it turns into fabric. But I always, like, the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh, now that is a cool uniform. And apparently only Picard gets to wear this version of the uniform, the gray shirt and the red jacket. And I just thought that is a nice jacket. Of course, you can buy them now, but I don't own one. I should own one, but this was the episode where that first appeared, and I felt it bared mentioning.
I didn't know you were such a trivia guy.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I always thought it was interesting that choice that only Picard got to wear the jacket. So
Yeah.
the rest of the crew have to just shiver a little bit, or why? What was the deal there? But
well, there is a precedent for captains having a special version of a uniform. I mean, Kirk in the last season of the original series had his green little wraparound thing.
Yep.
But this seems different because it's not just that it's a different uniform, but it's another big piece of fabric. It's heavier and it's sort of functionally different and warmer. Not warm enough to, because that was an issue. Like, he's down on this planet's surface. It's cold. They're building fires. He can't build a fire. Dathon gives him a burning branch to help him light his fire. Apparently, even this nice jacket is not heavy enough to keep him warm on the surface of Eladrel, but it was better than nothing. So I liked it quite a lot.
Yeah. This, like you said, this has appeared in a lot of top 5, top 10 lists. And in some ways, I'm kind of ashamed to say that when I first saw it, it was like, well, okay, that was a throwaway for me. But it just goes to show you that sometimes the rewatch and the rewatch can give you a different appreciation of things. I mean, I like the space battle as much as the next guy, probably more. Yeah. But at the same time, there are a lot of different things you can take out of episodes like this.
Right. Well, there was a space battle in this episode.
Oh yeah.
But what I like about it, and I have consumed a great deal of science fiction. There's some of it. Well, I don't know if you can actually see. Probably not. But up on that top shelf is 14 Isaac Asimov books, and everything from that on. All the Star Trek, all the Star Wars, all the superhero stuff. I've read books, I've watched the TV shows, the movies. I've been into a lot of science fiction, but I always find that it's not the spaceships and the weapons and the epic stuff that is what really interests me and catches my attention and makes me care about it. It's the human or species, various species, we'll call it human since they're all played by humans, right? But it's the interaction between sentient beings, all right? Whether they could be androids or they could be aliens, right? Okay, but it's because they're in space or on another planet, or they got the transporters or warp drive or things that we don't have, but they are dealing with the same kinds of problems that we deal with. There is anger and jealousy and misunderstanding and greed and all the things, right? All of the problems that we encounter. They are financial problems, not so much in the Federation, but there are romance problems, there are political problems, there are all kinds of things. And even though we have fictional people using weird technology and alien languages to address these things, there are always things that I can somehow identify with, and somehow it makes it safer to feel certain things and talk about certain things when I can be detached enough to put it, because it's not me. I'm not having this emotion. So no, certainly not, because I'm like Mr. Spock, I'm completely unemotional, but I can identify with and talk about the things that other people are experiencing, and that sort of makes it more okay for me to process. So that's just the fact that science fiction gives me an excuse to deal with emotions kind of in a way that more earthly grounded literature may not, is just one of the things that I love about it.
You said a lot there of a lot of important stuff. I mean, I know plenty of friends or acquaintances or whatever that will look at Star Trek or Star Wars or pick any of the science fiction things that you and I both enjoy and some that we really love, and they will laugh at it because they haven't taken the time or won't take the time to dig just that little bit deeper, that it's not about the makeup or the space battles or everything, that there's a lot more here. And it doesn't mean that this has to be like super deep messages all the time,
right?
But usually there's that foundation, and then some of the more humorous stuff or some of the more outlandish stuff is built on those basic foundations. And that's where you need to understand and appreciate, and maybe just spend a little bit of effort. If it doesn't come naturally to you, like it apparently does to Joe and I, then take a look at this and see if you can't develop a taste for it. I think you'll be really surprised at what you find.
Yeah, I as much as I've just talked about how important it is to be respectful of people from other cultures and with other views, I find myself feeling suspicious of people that don't love science fiction in general and Star Trek in particular. Like, well, okay, I won't try to kill you, but like, I'm not sure that you could be my friend because you're not getting it, man. It's important, but okay,
That's a really interesting point. And I mean, I guess I just look at it and say, okay, well, that's sort of your loss. And I don't mean that in an arrogant or egotistical sense. It's just like, I'm sorry. I'm sure there are people that look at me that way because I really can't appreciate opera. It's like, I just don't get it. It just doesn't resonate with me. And that's why
what about Klingon opera? Would you like Klingon opera?
Well, there are times, in bits and pieces, at least I'll give it a shot. But yeah, it's just a whole different thing, and maybe that's what makes it special to us because it's not special to everybody else. I don't know.
Yeah,
Joe, thank you. This is really interesting. You gave me some insights into it that I hadn't seen. I saw some, but I didn't see where you were going to come from. So this is exactly, I've said this a couple of times now, this is exactly what I wanted Trek Favorites to do, is to give me some more things to think about, some new things to think about, hopefully share some of that with some others.
I'm glad that I could do that. It was fun for me, and I hope that I have the opportunity to talk about some more of my favorites one day.
You will be back, no question. Before you go, though, tell folks where they can find you and if they want to communicate with you or share their opinions of Darmok or anything else.
Sure. Well, I'm trying to like improvise some cool Trekkie version of how, like, set your communicator to frequency low. Sorry. You can find me at takecontrolbooks.com. So I publish books and I write some books. And you can follow me on Twitter at Joe Kissell. That's Joe Kissell with 2 S's and 2 L's. And I really don't pay any attention to Facebook or Instagram or whatever. So if you have even the most modest geek skills, I'm sure that with no more than 30 seconds of effort, you can figure out how to email me. And if you can't, you probably shouldn't be emailing me.
Good point. Good point. Joe, thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Trek Favorites. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it, because I definitely did. And this is what Trek Favorites is all about. What are yours? Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit TrekFavorites.com to access all our shows, watch the video versions on our YouTube channel, and connect with us on Twitter and Facebook as @TrekFavorites.